GenCon is the biggest board game convention that we have here in the United States. It is only second to Essen, which is the biggest board game convention, which is held in Essen, Germany. So what's interesting is, of course, really big board game convention, just like E3 is. To video games, you have a lot of new games that come out. We're going to link a really good article that Ars Technica put out on the hottest games that came out this year at GenCon. And I wanted to kind of like talk about a couple of ones that I saw there that looked really, really interesting. Number one for me has got to be the Fantasy Flight showed off, demoed, and talked about they are coming out with a Fallout board game.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
It looks really, really interesting, and I like how they I saw like a demo of people playing this. I like how they actually made it where like you have your group of survivors or your survivor, and the whole map is essentially hexes that are flipped over and you don't know what's out there. And then as you go exploring, you start flipping them over and stuff like that. And they did a really good job of kind of like converting over of like you don't know what you're going to run into, just like when you're playing like Fallout 4 or something like that. Like you can go into a town and all of a sudden you run into a group of super mutants or whatever. Like they did a really, really good job of converting that over into a board game. Kind of like what I think they did with, if anybody's seen a demo of what we spoke of last time, the, what's his name? The Dark Souls board game, the one with the miniatures in it. Man, I had a friend of mine that played that. He's like, yo, if you want to talk about a board game that is just pure frustration, but it'll make you keep wanting to play it, it's just like the Dark Souls video game. Which I find funny because I've played Dark Souls and I like Dark Souls, but that is the most stressful freaking video game I've ever played. Because you'll sit there and you'll start going, I'm like, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And then you do that one little mistake that you like don't roll out far enough and you hit a rock or something and then boom, you're dead. And that's it. And you have to start all the way at the beginning.
It's funny. I really didn't think that I could get excited or like really into a board game that much. And because it's been a long time before I started playing board games again a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I played one called Betrayal on House on the Hill, and it's just great. It's kind of like that where you put the tiles down, you're in this haunted house, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna go upstairs. Oh, there's a pentagram in here, and then you roll to see what kind of omen it is and stuff like that. And it was like exciting. Like you feel like you're walking through this house that has basements and all that, and then in the end, someone turns into either a demon or something, and they have a task, and you're trying to stop them from doing the task. It's really great. So I can see where Fallout can bring something like that where you're out in the wasteland and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? What am I going to run into?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Betrayal at House on the Hill. So I picked that up like a couple months ago and finally sat down and played it with one of my friends. And the thing that I really like about the game is like it literally starts off as a cooperative game and then it turns into a everybody versus one. And it was so funny because, like you say, like, you know, you find an omen, you flip a tile, there's an omen, you roll these dice, and if you roll more pips than there are omens, the game keeps going. And then when you don't roll enough, that's when the haunting happens. And I love the little flavor that they put into the game where depending on the item that just got flipped over, and then you look at the book and it tells you the person with this highest stat is the person that's the betrayer. I thought it was phenomenal. And it was funny because when we played, my wife and I played with a couple of friends of ours, and my wife ended up being the betrayer. And it was so funny because her character was like the little kid. So it was like this little kid that was possessed by a demon that could summon these fire bats, and we had to like kill her essentially to escape. It was so freaking funny. But the next one that I will say that, so another one that was really surprising, and I had heard about this earlier, is Fantasy Fight releasing the Legend of the Five Rings LCG. So Legend of the Five Rings used to be a collectible card game in lieu of kind of like the Magic the Gathering. But just like Magic the Gathering, you had a big problem and it never really took off because it was the typical, you had to sink so much money into it. to kind of build a decent deck to play. I think Fantasy Flight has been doing a really, really, really good job at bringing back these old CCGs as LCGs, where essentially everything you need to play the game is in the box. So you have all the cards for the set. And it really, like, the first one of theirs that I've gotten was Netrunner, which phenomenal game. Phenomenal game, and it's a shame that it didn't get the legs that Magic the Gathering got back in the day. But I can understand why it didn't get the legs that Magic the Gathering got. Because especially if you look at the old CCG card art, nowhere in comparison to Magic the Gathering. Like, Magic the Gathering had way better card art on it, number one. And number two, like, Magic the Gathering, you could buy a starter set and play. And you could sit there and putz around and get a couple of expansion packs and fix one deck. The way that I saw how this thing Netrunner did is you didn't essentially get like a whole deck in a starter set. So you had to, right off the get-go, start buying expansion packs or booster packs and hope that you could get a deck together. So I think that was the thing that kind of like drove them down a bit, which wouldn't have may have helped them not get as much legs on that, which is a shame. But now the one that I will say that I saw here and I had heard about, and I'm like, oh yes, they actually have a board game called The Thing Infection at Outpost 31. And it is what you think it is. It is a board game, one of several. There have been a couple of them that are coming out based on The Thing. And what's interesting is this one is based off of the John Carpenter movie. The other one that I saw that was on Kickstarter is actually based off of the original novel that the movie is based off of. So it essentially plays the same way. What's neat about this one is it kind of plays in the essence of kind of like how Dead of Winter works in Dark Moon, where one person will be infected, and then their job is to try and infect and kill all the other people. And of course, the good people are trying to get to get to where the helipad is and get out. While and actually, I think also not only as the thing are you trying to infect everybody and kill everybody, but your other goal is to try and get on the helipad as well and get out. Because if you do get off of the station, you can essentially infect the rest of the world, which I will say is an amazing theme for this. And the thing that really is interesting about this is the fact that it's like you'll know what you are, you won't know what everybody else is if they're infected or not. And I think that was one of those things that made Dead of Winter really good, was you could have a betrayer, but you couldn't. And it was the whole, all right, why is this person doing this instead of that? Was really interesting.
I used to have, we played Battlestar Galactica, and I would always play Baltar. And I remember one time, I was not the Cylon, but I still ended up spacing one of the people just because I could. And they were so mad at me. I just love games where you can be, you have the betrayer aspect.
Oh, dude. It was funny because one of the times that we played Dead of Winter, and it was hilarious because it was towards the tail end of the night, so everybody had already been drinking a bit. And we start a round of Dead of Winter, and we deal out who's if you're loyal or you're a betrayer. And of course, I look up to my card, and right away I'm the fucking betrayer. I'm like, of course I'd be the betrayer. So I'm like trying to do my stuff, and I'm like doing this, doing that, and blah blah blah. And right away, my good friend just sits there like, Randy's the betrayer, and I'm like, what gives you that? He's like, you're a little sneaky, and you look at the type that you would be a betrayer. I'm like, what the fuck?
You're a little sneaky.
I'm like sitting there going, what the hell? I'm like, really? I'm like, who's to say that you're not the betrayer and you're trying to get me ousted and this and that and blah blah blah. And bro, everybody else wasn't having it. They were like, yeah, we're voting that you're the betrayer. We're kicking you out. I'm like, son of a bitch. it was so funny. That game really did make you like question, like, is this person like cool? Are they not? Um, the other game that seems very, very interesting here. I mean, I'll probably want to check out some gameplay of it, which I haven't. They didn't have was the Quest for El Dorado, and the reason why it's one of those games that is on my list. It was a nominee for the Spiel des Jahres, so that is essentially the German awards that they give for strategy games. They have like an advanced strategy game, a strategy game, and then like a kids game. And it's interesting, this was nominated in Germany. This is the first English version of the game that's come out. That looks really, really interesting, and I want to check that out as well. But other than that, like there wasn't a lot of other stuff that got me going. Now, the one thing that I will say that was interesting, and as soon as I heard about it, it was like, oh, okay, was that Fantasy Flight finally announced, to the chagrin of a bunch of people, and it's been over 10 years since the last time, but they are coming out with Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. Now, two things that are funny about this is, A, they say like, oh, we've streamlined some stuff. And B, they actually updated the actual time to play on the back of the box, because before I think they said it was like 30 to 90 minutes. I think they said like 30 to 90 minutes per person playing. And now it is on the back of the box a 4 to 8 hour game, which I believe that. And from friends of mine that have played the game say that, yes, that is more on par of what it'll actually take you to play a game of Twilight Imperium. And this is a game that to me has been intriguing, because it is considered the granddaddy of the 4X board games. And the thing that's interesting about that is they say, like, the thing about that game is like you need a big table to play this, because it is just a big game. It is essentially, you create a map with hex tiles, you pick an alien race, you start on your home planet, and that's how the game goes. And what makes it interesting is you have to go and explore out. You have to land on planets. You have to collect resources. But on top of that, you can actually build up an army. You can build up diplomacy. You can build up resources. You can do different things. And when it comes to getting to a planet where there's an enemy on it, I've heard, I haven't played it, when you go to resolve who gains control of the planet or not, you actually have like special abilities and special cards that you can say, okay, we're going to resolve this based on military or diplomacy or money or stuff like that. So you can have a player that I had a good friend of mine that he said they were playing, and one of the guys picked the alien race who already starts off as like the militaristic alien. And he was like, his first time, he's like, I'm putting all the eggs in the basket of military. And he amassed this huge army. And he was just going like to the point that other people were like, okay, we got to form an alliance to fight back against him, because he's just like literally wiping out the whole galaxy as he's going through it. And they got to this like one pivotal point of this one planet that if he would have got it, they were like, this is it. This is going to be game over. And the one guy that controlled the alien race that was more of a diplomatic one, he's like, all right, we're going to use the ability. We're going to solve everything by diplomacy. This dude had built up this huge army and had zero diplomacy. So he was just like looking around. He was just like, damn it, because he literally realized like he was screwed. He could not win that fight. And it was so funny. He says like that was so funny to see him go through all this thing of building up all these resources, and then all of a sudden just like lost steam. But that like right there is a game that like it's I can't wait to see, to see that out on a table and play that, give that a shot. Spend a whole weekend, as they say, playing that game.
Nice. Man, there's a lot at that place. Holy cow. I was just looking at everything. I was like,
what? At GenCon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, it's insane. Like, it's gotten to the point that this year, so they normally do GenCon at the Indianapolis Convention Center. And attached to the convention center, there's a tunnel that goes over, and they have a stadium. So last year, it was so busy in the Indianapolis Convention Center. They were like, we got to figure out, because this thing is getting bigger and bigger, and we got to figure out what we're going to do. And this year, they literally took all the Magic the Gathering and miniature stuff and put it in the stadium, and then did the convention center just for board game. And they also, I think, I don't think I'm stand corrected. They didn't put the Magic together. They put all the gaming stuff. So if you wanted to sit and play and the tournaments, they did it in the stadium. So they said, like, they freed up enough space, and they said even with freeing enough space, it was a bit easier to get around, but they could say, like, yep, this is going to be quick where they're going to run out of space again. And they were talking about how, like, they showed, I saw pictures and all that of, like, the gameplay area. Dude, the gameplay area, they have their library set up. It is literally, like, as big as a public library of shelves of just games and games and games and games. And you go up and you say, like, I want to play such and such game. And they literally check it out to you, and you go and you sit and play, and then you come back. Like, it's insane at how big GenCon gets.
Mm.